Hello, good evening. Welcome to the Vampire Book Club live stream. Thank you for coming. I'm so glad people are here. I know several people that are in the book club said they couldn't make it, but they're going to watch later and listen to our conversation later. So tonight we are talking about A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness, which the Vampire Book Club on Discord read together this month. And the club usually goes from the 13th to the 12th because, I like number 13s. Yes, A Discovery of Witches came out in, you say 2009. I think it was 2011, actually. This book's copyrighted 2011, so unless this is not the first edition, 2011 is the date. So this book, how many of you actually finished it? Look at this huge book. How many pages is this? Now, keep in mind that the book club votes on the book. We all choose it together. I suggest 3 books, and then the book club chooses. It's 579 pages, and this is the book that the book club chose. And the reason I suggested it is because, well, I own it, first of all, and my goal is to read all the vampire books I own. But also there is a TV series made out of it, and the first season of which exists, and I've heard they're working on a second season, so it's getting renewed, and it's been recommended to me, and this book was sent to me by a fan of it, someone who really likes this book. And they didn't just send me this book, they sent me all the books. So this wonderful person sent me all of these books, and I thought, if someone loves this book this much to send it to me, then, it's got to be worth reading. It's got to be interesting. I was really curious about it. Look at this. So we have A Discovery of Witches, the first book in the series. It's a trilogy. Then we have Shadow of Night, I think is the second one, and Book of Life, which is the third, unless I have that backwards. That's the trilogy right there. Then this is Time's Convert, which is, I think, a spin-off of it. It's not part of the trilogy, but it's a spin-off. And then this is like the wiki in book form, the fandom wiki, The World of All Souls, A Complete Guide to A Discovery of Witches, Shadow of Night, and the Book of Life. And it's illustrated. So I haven't actually read this yet, even though I have now read the first books. But if you have questions or concerns or curiosities about the book, I could look up your answers in here and find those answers for you, because there sure is a lot of stuff in this book. All right, hold on. Put this giant stack of books away. So yes, some wonderful person sent me all these books, and they were all like brand new hardcovers too, and they look great on my shelves, which is, let's face it, half the reason why I collect vampire books, because I'm a bibliophile that way. So we read the book, and unlike last month, where there were some negative opinions about the book we read, The Quick by Lauren Owen, it was kind of mixed. It was mostly positive. It was mostly just discussion. Someone asked if there are audiobooks. I'm pretty sure they are. These were New York Times bestsellers. New York Times bestsellers always get audiobooks. Anyway, the discussion about this book in our Discord chat was largely negative, which wound up surprising me, and I certainly contributed to that. But considering how popular it is, how lauded it is, how best-selling it did, I thought there would be less to complain about, I guess. And let me just read you the summary first, so that way you'll have some context when I actually start talking about it. So, first of all, the blurbs on the back. A Discovery of Witches is a strange and wonderful novel of forbidden love and ancient spells that turns every preconception about magic on its head. Deborah Harkness has written one of the most exciting novels I've read in years. I fell in love with it from the very first page. That's Danielle Trussoni, author of Angelology. Deborah Harkness's novel is a brilliant synthesis of magic and history, a gripping story of dangerous passion, intellectual intrigue, and fantastical beings. That's Ivory Pachoda, author of The Art of Disappearing. A fleet-footed novel set in a vivid other world, richly peppered with scholarly tidbits, huge fun with serious underpinnings of history. Jane Brodell, author of The Book of Fires. Right, and this is the inside flaps summary. Deep in the heart of Oxford's Bodleian Library, scholar Diana Bishop requests a manuscript called Ashmole 782 in the course of her research. And she's researching historical alchemical texts. So this is an alchemy book. Coming from an old and distinguished lineage of witches, Diana senses that the ancient book might be bound up with magic, but she herself wants nothing to do with sorcery, and after making a few notes on its curious images, she banishes it quickly back to the stacks. But what she doesn't know is that the old alchemical text has been lost for centuries, and its sudden appearance has set a fantastical underworld stirring. Soon, a distracting horde of demons, witches, and vampires descends upon the Bodleians' reading rooms. One of these creatures is Matthew Claremont, an enigmatic and eminent geneticist, practitioner of yoga, and wine connoisseur, and also a vampire with a keen interest in Ashmole 782. I mean, what more could you want in a romantic interest? He does yoga. That means he's flexible. Equal parts history and magic, romance and suspense, A Discovery of Witches is a novel of epic scope, traveling from the cobbled streets of Oxford to the chateaus and mountains of the Auvergne to a small town in upstate New York. It also takes us into a rich 1500-year history that spans Clovis and the Crusades, the Knights Templar, and the American Revolution. As Matthew and Diana's alliance deepens into intimacy, Diana must come to terms with age-old taboos and her own family's conflicted history, and she must learn where the modern woman she is meets the source of ancient power that is her legacy. With a scholar's depth and a touch of a great storyteller, Deborah Harkness has woven a tale of passion and obsession, the collision of magic, alchemy, and science, and the closely guarded secrets of an enchanted world. So, yeah, from this summary, it sounds like it's going to be like a National Treasure, Da Vinci Code level thriller of like historical detective work trying to solve a mystery with supernatural creatures and vampires spanning historical science. Like I was expecting, have you read The Historian by Elizabeth Kostova, where it's like this historian who's doing all this research into Dracula's past, but most of it's like flashbacks into the past and you're really like getting into the history? I thought it was going to be along those lines. What it wound up being is a romance between this witch scholar and this vampire yoga doing geneticist, and their kind of slow burn courtship that when they finally decide they're in love takes a very fast turn into like deep romance. And then the plot kind of comes in about maybe like 3/4 through the book. People have called this Twilight for adults, and I definitely see the comparison in the whole way it's structured, with the whole romance very slowly developing, a lot of focus on that conversations between lovers getting to know each other and sort of talking about, I'm a vampire and you're not, and we can't be together because it's forbidden, and, you know, kind of getting over that. And then all of a sudden a plot shows up and now the human, well, not human, she's a witch. The witch is in danger and the vampire has to rescue her. And then after that, he's in danger and she has to rescue him. And then it ends, it doesn't end. They decide how they're going to go about solving their problem. And they're like, okay, let's go do it now. And then the end. So I'm assuming book 2 just picks up immediately where book 1 left off, and they just kind of continue right in there. So one of the biggest complaints that our book club had about this book was the vampire character, which is interesting because, you know, we're all in the vampire book club. we love vampires. That's why we're here. We're probably more apt to be forgiving towards vampires that other people might perhaps dislike or judge. But the vampire character in this, he's 1,500 years old, which is pretty cool. He's described as this like big hunk of a man. He's like giant, he's tall, he's sexy, he's got muscles, he's smart, he does yoga. He is like a wine connoisseur snob, and there's a lot of wine porn in this book. Someone asks, oh yeah, the author of this is also a wine snob. It says she runs an award-winning wine blog in her bio here. But because he's so old, of course he has old-fashioned views about men and women, so he's a misogynist. And there's a whole setup where she's trying to figure out more about him. She's asking her friends who's met him before. And the friend's like, oh yeah, he hates women. Whenever he's at a conference and women ask him a question, he's a real like asshole to them. He's just terrible to women. So, be careful because you're a woman. He's going to be a dick to you. But then with her, he's not, because the thing is, he just hadn't met the right woman yet. And Diana, our witch protagonist, is not like the other girls. So she's the woman that he can be nice to, except he's not really. He's still very sexist toward her. He's controlling in the same way that Edward from Twilight is. He's stalkery. He's pushy. He doesn't respect her wishes. And it's all framed as romantic. It's framed as, oh, he knows best because he is the wise old vampire. But even when we meet his mother, who's not his real mother, she's his vampire sire, so she's older and wiser than he is, he's still framed as a leader because he's a man, because they still are coming from this feudal society. Matthew is still, the mother says like, no, we must defer to Matthew. What Matthew says goes. He's the head of the household. And then we find out he's not the head of the household. His older brother is, but when he shows up, it doesn't matter because Matthew's not just the head of the household, he's also the head of the vampire version of the Knights Templar, which is the Knights of Lazarus in this. And he's in charge of that secret society. So everyone has to bow to him. And he's just used to them bowing to him. And, maybe if I read this as a 20-year-old, I would have found that hot. But as someone who's old and wise now, it was not fun. And I did not see why Diana fell for him. Even at the times when he tells Diana, do this thing, and she says, no, I'm putting my woman's foot down and I'm not going to do this thing. He never learns that he was wrong. He just eventually it's like, fine, but this is the only time. And most of the stuff Diana puts up with, and she may think, oh, that's not cool, but she doesn't challenge it in a way that has any result or is effective at all. Artie Pavlov sent me $5. Thank you, Artie. Would I be interested in reading a novel, volumes 1 through 2/3, where the main character's love interest gets vampired in 1 and is prominent in 2, a D&D novel? I have never read any D&D novels before, so I don't know. I mean, that sounds similar to other novels, but with the D&D setting, I couldn't say. Someone else says they got married like 3 weeks in. Yeah, so the span of this book is 40 days. Even though it's 500 pages, they make it seem like so much longer. There's a point where, so she's being attacked by other witches who want this book she found. And Matthew says, okay, to keep you safe, I'm going to take you off to my French chateau in the countryside. And he takes her there, and they're just sort of frolicking in the countryside for a while. And she decides, you know what, I'm in love with this guy. And he's thinking, he was in love with her from the second he saw her, even though he didn't want to admit it because of that romance trope. His friend is like, yeah, he's in love with her. And Matthew's like, no, I'm not. But as soon as she decides she's in love with him and tells him she's in love with him, he has to leave her for a contrived reason and then comes back and she's like, never leave me again. I love you. And he's like, all right, we are married now. Because they have both admitted they love each other and now they are married. like straight up vampire married, because once he's like imprinted on her, it's forever, even though they are, they don't have a wedding ceremony or anything. By vampire custom, they are married. But this is taboo because vampires and witches are not allowed to mix. There is an old rule from the witches, demons, and vampires that none of the three groups are allowed to mix. And because of this rule, all the species are racist towards each other. And there's a lot of interspecies, creature, whatever they are, racism. But we find out, they're only racist because this rule has been ingrained into them all their lives, and they were taught to be racist for bullshit reasons. So Matthew and Diana decide to fight for their love and for the right for any people to love whoever they want to love. So it almost becomes a like gay marriage rights allegory, even though, there are queer characters in this actually. Diana's Aunt Sarah and her wife M are gay together. And of course the witches are gay because that witch stereotype. But also Matthew's demon friend Hamish is gay. So that's pretty cool. Someone says the author is gay. That's great. Read books by queer authors. Now, as much as I'm saying negative things about this book, I didn't overall dislike it. There was so much in this I wanted to like, and I'm really frustrated by the negative things because I feel like if those had just been fixed, it could have been great, which makes me really excited to watch the TV show because TV shows are usually good about fixing that. One of the things that really frustrated me about this book, besides disliking the romantic hero, which a good actor in a TV show might save that, might make him likable, was the structure. So the structure of this book, the first chapter, we immediately get Diana gets this Ashmole 782 book from the library. She's looking through it. She senses magic. We know she's a witch. And she immediately tells us, I'm a witch, but I don't like magic. I have rejected magic from my life, which is interesting. It's intriguing. It makes me want to read more. And then immediately we get an entire flashback to her tragic backstory of when she was 7 years old and her witch parents died. And that's why she rejects magic. And all this like huge exposition dump is in the first chapter. And then she finishes reading the book and she sends it back and it's done. And that's the first chapter. I'm like, well, now I have no reason to read further. Chapter 2, Matthew is introduced and she's like, there's a vampire in the library and he seems to be stalking me and I'm scared and unnerved, but he's also really hot. Then it ends. Like, that's where chapter 1 should have ended. You cut out that entire exposition dump. Tip to writers who are trying to get published for the first time. If you have a huge exposition dump in your chapter 1, it will hold you back. Clearly, this book got published. She was a debut novelist. She's a historian, so I think she had written nonfiction before this, but this was her first novel, and she got published, and it was a New York Times bestseller. So the exception, not the rule. Do not copy this style. Do not put exposition dumps in chapter 1. The other thing about this is as elements of the magic and world are introduced, they seem to come out of nowhere. Like the taboo against species being together. She never knew about that, even though she's a witch and her aunts who are raising her are witches and they should know all this and should have told her. No, it's a surprise. The fact that she can time travel, which is introduced like this far into the book. It's like, oh yeah, you've been time traveling all your life and that's the solution to our problems. Never came up before, wasn't even like hinted at or foreshadowed before. And the antagonists that come out of nowhere. So there's like a couple third act surprise new characters. She is just frolicking in the countryside, and all of a sudden this evil witch flies in and kidnaps her and takes her off to like torture her to try to get information about the book. And this witch has never been mentioned before. She's a chief antagonist. She's torturing Diana. She's horrible. It's terrible. She's part of this conclave that exists that then we find out about later. And then she flies off and we don't see her again. And then Diana gets rescued. And then later on, another surprise antagonist flies in and attacks Matthew and Diana. And it's Matthew's ex, and a surprise ex in the third act that, they almost die. It's really close. It's really dangerous. The stakes are really high. And then she immediately gets killed. And another thing about that character is like, she's one of the 2 people of color in this whole book. This book is very white, very white. And the fact that the Egyptian girl immediately dies was a little bit upsetting. Oh, Railcoon86 sent me $9.99. Thank you. Have I read the House of Commerce series by Kristen Painter? I have not. The main character is a former blood slave, and the main villainess is actually sympathetic. Ooh, that sounds really intriguing. Thank you. I will add that to my vampire wish list of books I need to find. Angie Kelly sent me $5. Thank you. Can you compare the lead vampire to the vampire Lestat? Oh my goodness. How did this vampire compare to an interesting and compelling vampire? They are like exact opposites, though they are both from the Auvergne, which I'm totally mispronouncing, but that region of France, which I was amusing when I saw that Matthew's chateau was in the same place as Lestat's chateau. I'm like, oh, I wonder if she's a Lestat fan, and she did that as an homage because they're both French. I am reading the chat. If I ever go quiet like this, I'm just reading the chat. What vampire clan would Vampire Masquerade would Matthew be? Probably a Ventru. He is such a snob. He's such a snob. And such a stickler for the rules. So, yeah, I've heard that the TV show introduces the surprise third act antagonist earlier, which, again, that's something a TV show is going to fix, right? Because you need to have more threads. When this is a first-person point of view novel, like with True Blood, the Sookie Stackhouse books are first-person points of view novels, you can't just follow one character and everything that revolves around her for a TV show. You need like an A plot, a B plot, C plot, and then like 4 D plots. So introducing those other characters earlier makes perfect sense. There are a few chapters in here that are not from Diana's point of view. They're in third person, omniscient-ish, usually focused around Matthew, but sometimes other people too, like her aunts. Artie Pavlov sent me $5 more. Thank you. You did read I Strahd book, D&D. Yes, I did. I did read the I Strahd book. So if it's the same kind of vampire. Oh, thank you for sending books. I love vampire books. I just made a new video today about my new vampire books. Sorry, I know a lot of you are asking questions in the chat. Let me keep talking about this book. I'll try not to get too distracted, and then we can go through and answer questions. And in answer to your question about comparing Matthew to Lestat, I will try to do that more once I finish getting through everything that the book club said. Don't let me forget, because I could talk about Lestat for hours. So yeah, the other thing is that someone else mentioned is the house that's alive. So Diana grew up in a haunted house, and in the third act, she and Matthew go to stay with her lesbian witch aunts in their haunted house. This house is alive and it's full of ghosts. So apparently ghosts are a thing and they're just everywhere. And again, this element wasn't mentioned or introduced at all early in the book. As an author and an editor and someone who's involved a lot in the developmental stages of making books, this book doesn't feel finished to me. It feels like, she wrote it, revised it. It doesn't have any like spelling problems or grammar issues or anything, but there's so much that's not set up structurally that it needed another draft to fix all those. And I'm just wondering why I didn't get it. Why it was acquired and published as is. I mean, clearly it didn't hold it back. It seemed to do fine, but it's so frustrating to read. And I'm wondering if the next books are better. Like, was this, first novel issues and then it gets better after this? So book 2. Book 1 ends when Matthew and Diana say, we're being chased by evil witches and evil vampires, and the only way to escape them is to go back in time where we can hide in time, because Diana can time travel. And we're going to spend some time back in time where you can learn how to use your powers that you've been repressing all your life, and then come back and fight a war between creatures. So in this book, they are back in time in Shakespeare times, in Elizabethan times, which the author, Deborah Harkness, is Elizabethan historian scholar, so she knows all about this time. So I'm hoping this is better structurally because it won't have any of those first book blues, and more interesting because this promised to be a great historical epic spanning 1,500 years. Yeah, it wasn't. The researchy stuff about the books was interesting, but it didn't go anywhere. So I'm hoping this one, it will go somewhere. Someone says they didn't enjoy this book, but they did like the third. So who knows? Maybe I won't like it either. But I have it, so you know I'm going to read it. Lucas Martin says that the show is better, but the romance is still insta-love in the show. I'm reading the chat. Yeah, the insta-love thing was weird. It definitely felt like an imprinty thing, though it was very Twilighty, and this was written after Twilight, so you have to wonder if that Twilight influence was on it either intentionally or subconsciously. Forgive me, I'm very thirsty. I need my water. Alyssa Ghost wants to know if she's an actual historian, why the heck was her representation of research on old manuscripts so wrong? Are you talking about the fact that she didn't wear gloves? I mean, she didn't say she wasn't wearing gloves, so maybe she was wearing gloves and just didn't mention it. Guys are talking about the weird sex. So yeah, another thing that was very similar to Twilight about this book was the sex. So even though they're married, even though they're together, even though they decided to, fight the system and fight the man and have this forbidden vampire witch relationship, Matthew, her vampire husband, doesn't want to have sex with her, just like Edward in Twilight doesn't want to have sex with Bella. He doesn't say it's because he's afraid he's going to hurt her like Edward does, which, is valid. But he says it's because why rush? There's time, which she accepts as him being honest, but to me seems like a bullshit reason. And I'm kind of like, okay, what's the truth? What's really going on here? They do sexual things. They have oral, they sleep together, but there's a lot of kissing and making out, but they don't actually go all the way and consummate their marriage, as they call it. Not in this book. And he says towards the end of this book, don't worry, we'll do it when you're safe. So presumably back in Elizabethan England, when there's no sanitary practices, that's when they're going to do it. That'll be fun. Sapphire Shell 91 sent me $10. Thank you so much. Hello from Australia. Have you read or would you be interested in reading the Parasol Protectorate series by Gail Carringer? It's an enjoyable Victorian urban fantasy. I would be interested in reading that. I have heard good things, and I own the first book in that series. I haven't read it yet. It's on my shelf, so we might read it for the Vampire Book Club. I sort of try to arrange our next reads by a theme a little bit. So maybe if we do a girly, steampunky theme, I'll fit that in there. But it does sound really interesting. Oh, Sean Blumenshine mentions that he assumes the real reason for resisting the sex was the fear of pregnancy that comes out of nowhere. Yes, another thing that comes out of nowhere. We find that Matthew's housekeeper vampire, because why a vampire would want to live eternity as a housekeeper, I don't know. She gives Diana this special tea, and she says, drink this tea. And we find out later that it was a contraceptive tea because they were afraid what would happen if she got pregnant. Meanwhile, we've been told that vampires and witches can't conceive, that vampires can't conceive at all anyway. But they get to a point where they're like, but what if we can? And then she stops taking the contraceptive, even though they're not having sex yet. But why Matthew would want to not have sex when he thought they couldn't conceive in the first place is still kind of, it doesn't make sense unless he's not telling us the whole truth. Yeah, and there's a big part where she's like, Diana's like, Matthew has his secrets. He's had this whole eternity of life before me. He's going to have secrets, and I'm not going to know them all, and I just have to accept that. But no, I won't accept that. I want to know his secrets. And she's wishy-washy on it, and she goes back and forth. But I'm assuming a pregnancy is going to happen just like it does in Twilight, even though theoretically vampires can't conceive. Turned out in Twilight it was just the female vampires that couldn't, but the males could. It just usually the vampire babies destroyed the vampire mom. So I'm assuming it's going to be the same in this because Twilight for adults. Not that that's a bad thing. Alyssa says, something I don't get about these books. Everyone always obeys all the rules all the time. That's not how people work. Tell them not to bone and they'll be out there screwing in the streets. It's true. So the whole thing about the races can't mix, you think they wouldn't be the first people to defy that rule? At least not that we've heard of. We do meet a couple, again, a surprise, new characters in the third act of the book, a demon couple. And the way demons work in this book is they're born human, and then you kind of find out like, oh, surprise, you had a demon baby. Kind of almost like changelings, but it's just the way they're born. So this one demon, she was born to witch parents. So she was supposed to be a witch, but nope, she's a demon. And she is with another demon because you can only be with your own species. But she's pregnant. So she's like, my baby is going to be a witch. My baby might not be a demon. My baby will be a witch because I'm a witch. So what will that mean? And how is this the first time that's ever happened? Oberon 21 says, I see a lot of parallels with Outlander as well. I watched the first season of Outlander. I haven't read the book. I guess the parallels I see are the old-timey man who's a misogynist and has to learn to be more feminist, though I don't see Matthew actually learning that. Matthew doesn't change. All he learns to do in this book is to accept that he's in love and be like, well, I'm going for it. And he even says that even though he's been married before, he had a child before, he's had romances before, none of them were real because he never felt the truest true love that he feels with Diana. It's so tropey. Speaking of Twilight, are you going to buy the new one? Yes, Stephanie Meyer has announced she finally finished Midnight Sun. Do you remember Midnight Sun, that book that she was starting to write Twilight from Edward's point of view, and then it got leaked on the internet and she got really upset. So she's like, that's it. I'm never finishing Midnight Sun. You guys just read the leaked version and that's it. You're never going to have more. So we all read it. And it was like, the first 6 or 7 chapters. But now she's finally finished it and is releasing it, and it's going to be $27 because they can sell it for that. So no, I'm not going to buy it. I'll probably wait until someone gives it to me because I get a lot of vampire books for Christmas and stuff. Yeah. But I'll read it if I get a hold of it. Or I'll probably check it out from the library because I'm curious, but I'm not going to buy it myself. $27 for Twilight? Are you kidding me? So does Matthew learn anything? I think the arc of what their relationship is supposed to be is she's supposed to be like, I'm a strong, independent woman, and you need to learn that I am strong and I don't just need to be protected all the time. I can protect myself. But that doesn't happen in this book. In this book, she is pretty useless. She doesn't want to learn her magic. She doesn't want to use her magic. They have to pressure her and force her into learning to use her magic. So she's not making Matthew a better person at all. And, when you have a relationship romance plot where the characters are really flawed, it could be really interesting to see them grow and change and make each other better people. But that doesn't happen in this book. Someone in the chat just mentioned that it takes him 3 books and he gets there, which, okay. But, he is just an awful boyfriend in this book. And not even in the, indulgently tropey billionaire jerk boyfriend romance way that a lot of people like. He's just an ass. Yeah, 3 books, and not just 3 books, 3 books this size. Look at this. And the fact that this book cuts off, they're like, okay, time to go back in time. Bye. And then this book immediately comes back. Okay, now we're back in time. Let's go. You can tell this was like one giant book that just got chopped into 3. Which, fine. I did that with my book too. But it's so frustrating. And book 1 wasn't reworked at all to have its own arc. So frustrating because it did have potential, and I can see why the person who sent it to me loves it, and I can see why it did well, and a lot of people loved it, people who might be more forgiving about structural things that are frustrating to me. And like I said, I'm excited to watch the show because I think it will make a good TV show because the elements are there. It just needed another draft. It needed to be worked. And that's what a TV script is, right? Someone said, honestly, I held her down. I gave up when he held her down to make her answer questions about his magic. Her magic. Yes. So after she gets kidnapped, so she gets kidnapped and tortured, and that's like, 3 or 4 pages at the second half of a chapter, and then she gets rescued. And then it's like 40 pages of her comfort fluff after that. Like the plot flies in, kidnaps her, and then the plot stops again. And then after that, it's another 40 pages of a training montage of her being forced against her will to learn to use her magic powers, because her magic powers, the reason she's not into them, the reason she doesn't use them is because she has so many magic powers. She's the most powerful witch that ever witched, but she doesn't know it because her parents knew this. And before they died, they were worried that she would be targeted for it. So they bound her powers. They spellbound her, which nobody knew, but is apparently a big deal because spellbinding someone is just horrible. But her mother, who could see the future, knew that she would meet Matthew one day. And she knew that her love for Matthew would save her. So she connected the spellbinding to when she would meet Matthew. So that way, when she would meet Matthew, the spellbinding would stop being a thing and she would start being able to access her powers again. So surprise, this is another thing that's introduced like after 400 pages that we learn. I mean, I'm not even mad that she's the most powerful witch that ever witched. I kind of love that trope. I love it when like the protagonist turns out to be the special. I like it. I know a lot of people are frustrated by it, but that's my jam. It's just the way it's handled that's frustrating. I'm just reading the chat. Oh yeah, another thing about her as a protagonist is she starts out the book as this very scholarly historian. She is, she's in the second half of her 20s. She's done grad school. She's got her PhD. She's doing research. She's a professor. She teaches. She's an adult with a life and a career. And she's a very mature woman. And she acts that way. And when she starts dating Matthew, she's dating him that way. She's very cautious. She's reserved. She's careful. But as soon as the switch is flipped and she's like, but I'm in love now, she immediately starts acting like Bella from Twilight. She acts like a hormonal teenager who is whiny and fussy and stubborn. And it's like she's going through puberty all of a sudden, especially with all the powers coming out at the same time. And it does start feeling very YA. And I'm like, is this the same woman? What happened to her character? Where did her development go? Why did she devolve into this passive, weepy woman who's just, I can't live without my love. He left me for 3 days and I'm just going to go cry so hard that my witch powers made the tears so big that it made an ocean of witch tears. And just let me wash away in the water. Just let me wash away. Life's not worth living without him in it. Like, girl, he'll be back. Just wait. Why is she acting like a hormonal teenager? Nikki Spinell sent me 10 euros. Thank you. I haven't read the book, but I'm just popping into semi-love to all of you. Signed, a fledgling Greek patron, addicted to your content and opinions. Oh, thank you so much. Faye says, my favorite parts were early on when they were whining and dining and discussing his journey through history. Yes, that kind of slow burn romance where they were both acting like adults. I was still into it then. And at that point, I was still recommending it to friends who I know like those kind of tropes. Because, there's some people who the whole Twilight for adults thing would immediately turn off. But for some people, Twilight is an indulgent, fun read, minus the racism and misogyny and imprinting on babies stuff. But like the slow burn romance it hits a trend for some people. But yeah, as soon as the insta love happened where they're just like, we're married now, it kind of went off the deep end. think part of Diana's thing is she has abandonment issues. Well, her parents died, so yeah, that'll give a girl issues. And someone in our book club mentioned that they thought because Diana had to work so hard to be so strong all her life, that once she met someone who's like, let me take care of you for a change, she might allow that to happen and be cool with that. But it wasn't executed very well. It was sloppy, and it just kind of happened too suddenly. It didn't develop, and that's why it was frustrating. The love story should not have happened so fast in the first book. That was one element that annoyed me. Just destiny that they be together. No real courtship or healthy development of their relationship. Yeah, all the times they were dating, it seemed like she didn't want to be around him, and she was just agreeing to it. Like the first few times they hung out, she felt kind of forced into it. And it wasn't that she was afraid of him as a vampire, but she was cautious, and she was intrigued by him because he's hot, and who wouldn't be? But she's also just like, he's a dick. And I'm like, yes, honey, he is. But I was waiting for that Pride and Prejudice reveal where it was going to turn out, but he wasn't a dick all along. He was actually doing really good stuff, and he's a great guy who treats his tenants well. But that never really came. They tried to show that he was a great guy by showing how much everybody loved him in his family, but their love was kind of bent out of fear, like, well, he's the lord of the family, so we have to love him. And it didn't come off as very relatable. Like, it didn't make us fall in love with him. How did I like Kim Newman's Anno Dracula in the sequels? I don't remember you discussing them because I haven't read them yet. I actually suggested them when we were voting for our book club, and Anno Dracula was one of the ones that was up against this one, but the club voted for this. So I'm going to put Anno Dracula up again next time we vote and see if maybe we can read it that time, because I like reading with people. That's more fun to me. Oh, Jenna99 sent me 5 Canadian dollars. Thank you. I tried to read this book. Didn't like how Twilighty it was, and I hope the next book for the club is better. Me too. Or not better, because I don't want to say... I didn't hate this book. I just have a lot of complaints, which are fun to talk about, which is why we're here. Oh, there's so much I wanted to like about this book. So I'm really excited to watch the show. Oh, hello from Madrid. Okay, what's-her-face said, I loved his brother, Matthew's brother. He was an ass, but he owned being an ass. Yeah, Matthew's brother was despicable, and I like villainous characters, so I could see the appeal there. The problem with the brother is that the brother comes in, again, like halfway through the book. Surprise, this brother is now a character, only been vaguely mentioned before. And the brother's name is Baldwin, and he is just completely pompous and wants to be in charge and is controlling, and he's supposedly got this bloodlust that he's just going to eat any person who comes near him. And if he even so much as smells blood, he's going to snap and go vampire on you. They keep warning us about this, and it never actually ends up happening. Actually, they warn us a lot about the vampires being like so bloodthirsty, and if they're even close to blood, they're just going to snap. But none ever do. Like, there's a part where the scientist vampires, because Matthew has 2 scientist vampires, Marcus and Miriam, and they have to draw blood from Diana, and they're like, oh, are we going to be able to handle it? Yeah, they handle it fine. And then Diana has to take a bath to wash off all the blood, and they're like, oh, if she gets in the bath water, Baldwin will smell the blood in the bath water from downstairs, though why he wouldn't smell it when it was on her anyway, but then he doesn't, and it's fine. So a lot of that thing where you write something, you tell the reader something, but you don't show it, and it's not supported, that's bad writing advice. Don't do that. I'm reading the chat. Oh, you're talking about Lestat again. Matthew is a totally different character archetype than Lestat. Lestat is this flamboyant, carefree rule breaker who wants to change the world and get a lot of attention. Matthew is none of those things. Matthew is very strict, very rule strong. He is a military leader. He wants to like have structure and order. None of those things. They're both French, I guess. They're both pretty, but entirely different ways. Like Matthew is this big burly guy, and Lestat's more like, country boy. Jen in 99 sent me $5 Canadian. Thank you. I hope the next books that's picked gives me more to talk about. Well, we have picked the next book already. If you're in my Discord, then you'll know what we've picked. I'll mention it more towards the end of the stream. We'll talk about that then. So the other thing about the scientist vampires, one of them, Marcus, is Matthew's fledgling, which he calls his son. So vampires in this world, when you turn a vampire, they are your son. And the way it's treated, at least by Diana, is that he's his actual son. Now, Matthew's 1,500 years old. Marcus is like 100 years old. So there's that age difference there. He could be his son. But Marcus is a grown-ass man. And when Diana becomes Matthew's husband, she's like, that means Marcus is my son too. And she says it kind of as a joke, but then it becomes a real thing. And she starts treating him like that. Like Marcus gets threatened. She's like, no one will threaten my son like that. And I'm like, really? He's 100 years old and you're like 26 and you're thinking of him as your son now? That's creepy and gross and weird. And they all just go with it. And also, don't vampires ever turn someone they're romantically interested in? Like Matthew's mother turned him as a kindness because he was like this village boy that she had seen grow up. So he could have been like a son to her. But it said that her husband, who's now dead, turned her romantically, but she would have been his daughter. So it's like, it's weird that they're so strict about that. Maybe it's explained more in later books. Marcus was turned during the American Revolution, so he's 200 years old. I knew it was one of those wars. I was thinking Civil War. I'm reading the chat. Faye says, like I said on Discord, there are some weirdly paternal vibes in the ways Matthew talked to Diana. Yeah, Matthew really talks down to Diana. He's very condescending. He treats her like a daddy. And she doesn't like it, but she accepts it. Like, she's not doing that strong, independent character trope thing where she's like, no, I'm going to stand up to your misogynist old-fashioned ways and fix you. She's just like, and then goes along with it anyway, because everyone tells her she has to obey Matthew because, he's in charge and that's the only way we'll win this war. And it's framed that he's supposed to be right. And the one time where she is like, no, Matthew, I'm not going to do what you tell me. It's because he wants her to leave him for her own safety. And she's like, no, I won't leave you for your own safety or my own safety. And her being there does make it worse. It does get them both injured. So he was right that time. So the So Alex says, Philippe didn't turn Yezebel into a vampire. Those are Matthew's parents. So they were romantically connected, but they didn't make each other. But doesn't that ever happen with any vampires? Or do you only make a vampire of someone you feel parental towards? I've been talking about this book for 49 minutes. You guys have been asking me a lot of questions in the chat. Please ask me questions now that are only about this book. For anything else we want to talk about for this book. Yeah, it's said in this book that Matthew will never turn Diana into a vampire, and he will never allow anyone else to turn her into a vampire. Diana asks Miriam, who is Matthew's scientist sidekick. She's like the grumpy lady trope who's just like never happy and is there because she's loyal, even though she has no reason to be. When Diana was worried she would die, she said, Miriam, Please make me into a vampire rather than letting me die. And Matthew finds out about this later. And he's like, absolutely not. That will never happen. And Diana's just like, okay. Which, you know, props to him. He's like the love of his life. And he's like, well, she'll die in 80 years and then my life will be over. And he's just going to deal with that. But they haven't really discussed it that much. But, you know, the whole point of Twilight was that Bella wanted to be a vampire and Edward was like, no. And that was a big conflict between them. And this, Diana is just like, yeah, whatever. Neat Dogs 212 sent me $2. Always love your channel. Been a fan for years. Thank you so much. Is there a specific type of reader I would recommend this book to you if you recommend it all? I would recommend it to people who like romance. First of all, you have to be into romance. If you have an itch for historical nerdery stuff, because there's a lot of parts of this book where Diana is doing her research into ancient alchemy, and it's just like straight up her research, and we're just sort of reading what she's researching. So if that wouldn't bore you, this book would be for you. If you like that controlling, borderline abusive boyfriend who's supposed to be read as romantic trope, I've definitely seen that trope done better elsewhere, but it's here. So if that's your kind of guy, you might like Matthew. Can't wait to see how they do him in the show, because I'm sure the show makes him better. Just like with Outlander. Outlander made the guys much less horrible in the show than they are in the book. Alyssa says, I thought Matthew explicitly said mating was about turning your sexual partner when talking to Hamish. Well, you know what? There's a lot of things that are said in this book one way and then are contradicted later on in the book. So you could very well be right. That was a scene that's very early on in the book. But by the end of the book, they weren't talking about it that way at all. Yeah, there's like the thing with Baldwin's the head of the family. No, wait, Matthew's the head of the family. Just mistakes. It felt like a straight up mistake in the book that an editor should have caught. The thing about Diana knowing which witches and wizards are on the conclave, and then later on she's like, what's a conclave? And it has to be completely explained to her. The conclave is 3 witches, 3 vampires, and 3 demons that sort of run the world. It just felt like mistakes, contradictions. Who would win, Lestat versus Matthew? I don't know how physically strong Matthew is. Lestat's like god levels of strong, at least now, in 2011 when this book came out. So depends. I've not been shown how strong Matthew is. He can't fly and he can't like use telekinesis like Lestat can. So Lestat would probably win. Are we entirely sure that there weren't 2 Dianas? You mean like pre-love Diana and post-love Diana? So with the time travel stuff, they go back in time. First, they're practicing going back in time. They go back to a night that they experienced with Matthew's mom, and then they re-experience it, but they don't really explain what happens to their past selves when they go back there. And it's weird. Like, I hope that gets explained better in the book. If it was explained in here at all, it's so minuscule that I missed it. And I'm a very careful reader. But it's like, where was your past self when you went back in time that you're suddenly like not even there? And then how do you still remember it? Time travel paradox. JRL Studio sends me $9.99, a belated birthday gift. Oh, thank you. Yeah, my birthday was May 1st. I can't believe it's May 13th already. This month is going so fast. You made me interested in this book, if only to make my work in progress not too much like it. Love watching your stuff. Oh, yeah. Learn from this book's mistakes. Take all the good parts of this book and do the good things. So yeah, if Diana feels like she was supposed to be 2 different characters, pre-love and post-love, what if she like time traveled back into herself and that's why she's a different Diana? I don't know. That's a bit far-fetched, I think. Oh, thank you for the happy birthday wishes. I had a nice birthday. Between my father and my brother, I got 16 books for my birthday. So I got a lot of new books. And I just made a video today that I'm going to post on YouTube in the next couple of days when I get it edited about all my new books. Carrie Author says, I read it a while ago, but I think it's like you kind of inhabit your past self. I don't know. It was weird. Yeah, someone else mentioned that too in the book club Discord chat. So maybe that gets explained in the next book. I know when they go back to Tudor England, I've been told that there's a thing about past Matthew disappearing and present Matthew appearing, and it's like a plot point. So maybe that's when it gets explained. I'll have to read it to find out. Not only did I get 16 books for my birthday, I also got, which isn't counted among the 16, from my brother Nick, my little brother, this set of Sherlock Holmes book. This is the entire Sherlock Holmes collection in teeny tiny book form. Aren't they cute? And they had like enough books here that there's one left over. So this was just a journal with Sherlock Holmes. Isn't this the cutest little book set? This book set also exists. They have a complete set of Shakespeare's novels and complete set of Jane Austen's works. But those two are like no longer extant that I can find. So I'm very disappointed that I can't collect all sets of the sets. But these teeny tiny Sherlock Holmes books, sorry, I've gotten off topic. These aren't even vampire related. Though Hound of the Baskervilles is considered a Gothic novel. So this lives on my Gothic novel bookshelf. So cute. Any more questions or thoughts to share about A Discovery of Witches? We are coming up on an hour now. I love this book, but demons feel like they're somehow filler monster, not well developed at all. That is true. So the demons' one character trait is that they're kind of scatterbrained. They don't think the same way as humans do, so they can come off as mentally disabled or mentally ill, but it's really just their demon brains work differently. Except for the two main demons that we get to see, because they're not like the other demons, and they actually think normal and act normal, and they're basically just like people or like vampires. And then there's the one, Sophie, the pregnant demon, and she's very like, oh, I'm such a free spirit. Look at me communing with nature. It's very tropey. Will I read Shadow of Night next? No, I'll probably take a break from these books. I got the other book to read for the book club. I am reading books for my vampire reviews, and I'm also in my IRL book club, where we read sci-fi fantasy books. This book had toast, yes. So the last book we read, The Quick by Lauren Owen, there was like a recurring thing with toast. This book likewise had a recurring thing with toast and tea, though the wine thing kind of overwhelmed it. There was a lot of wine porn in this book. They're always taking time to drink and describe these ancient bottles of wine. They were drinking like 500-year-old wine, and it was still good. So much wine porn in this book. The only other ancillary character I liked was the library. The library was great, and it's a real library that you could go to that I really want to go to. Yeah, there was library porn in this book. Oh, Matthew's house. I liked Matthew's house, his French chateau. That was great. Love the house. The way Diana regresses to a childlike way is quite disturbing to me because it reminds me of when I read a woman's true story about the way she would do when talking to her father abuser. Yeah, I can see that definitely being triggery. It's weird the way she regresses. The author is a huge wine enthusiast. She has an award-winning wine blog, according to the back flap of the book. However, I looked up her wine blog. It is still up. You can still find it. Just search for Deborah Harkness wine blog. But her last update on the wine blog is from 2011, the year the first book in this series came out. So she stopped updating it. So I don't know. She just got too busy writing novels to keep up with her wine blog. Who knows? She is still active on the internet. I looked her up on Twitter. She's tweeting. She's in quarantine like all of us. What are my thoughts on Marta and the role she plays? Marta is the housekeeper vampire. And she's very French. She was an old woman when she became a vampire, so she's not sexy or glamorous like everyone else. And she just lives as the eternal housekeeper. And I could see it happening. It's weird that a vampire would choose to do that. But, if a vampire is going to turn their servant so their servant can be their eternal servant, there's got to be some kind of emotional pressure manipulation going on there. She was a cool character, though. I liked that she was a female character who wasn't sexy. That was nice. Artie Pavlov sent me $5 for IRL. I recommend Azure Bonds, Wyvern Spur, and Sprung of Sorrels. D&D trilogy. So much fun, so sassy, forever in love, even though flawed novels. Well, any book that's sci-fi or fantasy is game for my IRL book club. My IRL book club would not read vampire books with me. So, that's why I started this book club. What did I think of the social structures of the vampires and the witches? Well, the way the vampire social structure was very patriarchal, very creepy, male-dominated, even old, powerful female vampires bowing to the men with this feudal system that was, I guess I could see why they did it, but I don't like it. But the witches, you have all these powerful women, and is much more female prominent, except for Nox, who's the main wizard on the conclave. But when it came down to they're having a war meeting, right? You got Matthew and the demons and the witches, and they're all in this meeting where they're talking about what they're going to do and how they're going to handle the situation. And then there's a point where Matthew's like, okay, everyone except the men leave the room. And all the witches get up and they're like, okay. But then Diana's sassy lesbian Aunt Sarah is like, what? And he's like, all right, Sarah, you can stay. So this one powerful witch gets to stay. But meanwhile, these super powerful witches, her other Aunt M is super powerful and wise and smart. Diana's the most powerful thing they've got. They just kick them out of the room so the men can plan. And they're all just cool with it. And the women are like, let's go make dinner and wash the dishes. And nobody thinks it's bad. It's not questioned. It was frustrating. I loved Marcus. His relationship to Diana is weird, but he's cool. Yeah, Marcus was pretty cool. If any of them reminded me of Lestat, it was Marcus, and not just because he was blonde. He had that charm, that sort of effortless, eternally young charm, carefree. Sarah is sassy and doesn't take shit from anyone. No, and Sarah is also a huge lush, constantly drinking. I liked her. Faye sends me $5. Thank you for teaching me more on vampires and always inspiring me to write after watching your videos. I'm so pleased to be part of the club. Thank you. And thank you for joining my club. I was afraid nobody would join my club, but my book club is doing pretty well. A lot of people have joined it, but not everyone is reading the books. And that's okay. If you just want to join the book club just to watch and lurk and listen to us talk about the books for good or bad, you can do that. It's on the Discord, open to everyone. Alex Kingston plays Sarah in the show. Ooh. I have also been told there's more people of color in the show, which, thank goodness, because this takes place in London, and it's all white people. It's not very realistic, except for the yoga teacher, of course. She gets to be from India. If you like Marcus, Times Convert centers on him and his transformation during the American Revolution. Oh, that's what Times Convert is. It's Marcus's backstory. So Marcus is a doctor vampire. He was a war doctor during the war, the Revolutionary War, which I learned all about from Hamilton and, school. So cool. I didn't like him. And when I found out more about his backstory, I wasn't super into that backstory with the war doctor stuff. I just liked his personality. I like that Matthew was just like, brr, these are the rules. Do it this way. Marcus is like, no, Dad, you can't tell me what to do. And he's just like cool with it. He's not scared of his dad or anything. But the whole dad thing was just weird because I think they would have been bros. Thank you, Castle Arcadia. I wish there had been more focus on the side characters. I found most of them to be extremely interesting. Like, wasn't that true for Twilight too? It's like the main characters are the most white bread, bland, boring people, and the side characters actually seem cool. True, Alyssa. Very true. All right. Get in your last questions and thoughts about the book before we move on to other things. What is a water vampire? I don't know. I hope the person who sent me these books doesn't think I'm ungrateful or isn't disappointed that I have criticisms about it. I'm glad that I had the experience to read it. I love how beautiful these hardback books are. I think they're so pretty and I love owning them. It definitely made me interested in the books and I can't wait to watch the show. I'm thinking when I watch the show, I'll probably do a proper vampire review on the show, make some content out of it, make a video out of it. Right now, I'm doing unscripted content on my channel because during quarantine, when school is out of session, I have to homeschool a 5-year-old kindergartner, which you'd think would be easy, but it's not. And it takes up all my time and I cannot write. Between that and my other jobs, writing isn't happening. So I'm doing unscripted content on my channel right now, hence the vampire read-throughs with the vampire and the new one that's coming up that I just recorded today. But when I am able to get back to scripted content, I do have a queue of reviews requested by my Patreon patrons that are coming up. And then I'd like to do Discovery of Witches TV show. I should read a book called Awoken. I have like 4 copies of that on my bookshelf as we speak. You all should read Awoken. I can't believe people are still reading Awoken. If you don't know what Awoken is, let me show you. It's not a vampire book, but it's a Lovecraftian mythos book. So if you like Cthulhu, read this book. They're written by a stay-at-home mom in Ohio. Who heard of her? Oh, Doll88 did fan art of Awoken. I loved the Awoken fan art. I searched for it obsessively. I love it. Did I ever read the Vampire Support Group? No, I did not. That's still on my shelf. Maybe the book club will read it. So, next up for the book club is Sunshine by Robin McKinley. My theme for books that we voted on this time were pulpy, mass-produced paperbacks. And Robin McKinley is very famous for her book Beauty, which is a retelling of Beauty and the Beast, which I read back in the day because a lot of Phantom of the Opera fans were like, you should read Beauty because Beauty and the Beast is similar to Phantom of the Opera. So I have read her work before. I don't remember it very well. But Sunshine first came to my attention because Anne Rice on her Facebook page one day was like, I just reread Sunshine. It's amazing. It's great. What a wonderful vampire book. And I'm like, well, if Anne Rice likes it, I'm intrigued. I don't always agree with Anne Rice's taste in things, so I don't know whether I will end up liking it or if it's going to go the opposite way. As you have told me in the book club, there are a lot of similarities between Sunshine and A Discovery of Witches, and it'll be interesting to see how it's handled differently, the tropes, the potential problem areas, and we're going to see what this is like. Thankfully, it's a whole lot shorter than Discovery of Witches. It's only, let's see, about 400 pages, but they're mass market paperback pages, so technically shorter. Should be a softer read. Jin Jam asks if I'll be doing any more videos on vampire anime or manga. Well, I did just watch Vampire Night on Netflix because it's there, and oh, did I have feelings about that? I might do a video on that once I'm able to do scripts again. All the Lestat talk in the chat made you order Interview with a Vampire for the first time. Good! I love that book. It's my favorite vampire book. Well, one of them. What happened to the sequel to Awoken? Oh, the sequel to Awoken. So Lindsay, Nella, and I started outlining the sequel to Awoken, and we had a pretty good outline down. We had a few plot holes that we couldn't figure out how to solve. And that held us up. And so we decided to have a powwow, a meeting, just to sit down and talk about it, figure out those plot holes. And we did, except for a couple we still need to figure out. But we reached out to our team and we're like, we're bringing the team together. We're going to do it as soon as we figure out these plot holes. And then I got busy writing my novels. Lindsay got busy writing her novels. We were all busy with our web shows. There was just too much going on. And we felt that the ship had kind of sailed on the point we were making with this parody about those problematic young adult book tropes that need to be discussed from a feminist angle, and the points we were making, and we would just be doing it for gratuitousness, which would still have been fun, and we still wanted to do it. We all still like sit around and sigh every once in a while, being like, yeah, it'd be nice to go back to that. But it's been so long that I think the ship has sailed and it's not going to happen. So sadly, no sequel to Awoken. I mean, I'm not going to say never because even Lindsay's not saying never, and she's the final word. So it could still happen. You never know. Sherlock Holmes story, The Adventures of the Sussex Vampire, is fun. Maybe you could do it for vampire read-throughs, even though there are no real vampires in it. Maybe. As long as we can still talk about like vampire tropes, even, or like vampire metaphors, possibly. Maybe. I'd have to revisit it. It's been so long since I read it to try to remind myself what we could actually talk about. I hope someday you discuss Dracula the Undead by Dacre Stoker and Ian Holt. That book is horrendously bad. Yes, it is. And Dacre Stoker told me all about how that book came to be, which he is such a sweet guy. I hate saying bad things about his books, but it is so bad. So what happened is Ian Holt had written Dracula the Undead, couldn't get it published, was having trouble. He met Dacre Stoker and he's like, I got the sequel to Dracula I wrote. Maybe if you came on board with me for this sequel, I could actually get it published. And Dacre's like, sure, sounds fun. So he read it and he gave some contributions to it. He's a research guy, so he did a lot of like researchy stuff to help it. But the novel was already written. It wasn't his brainchild. So I feel less bad saying that it's badly written. And can't stand Dracula the Undead, though I feel bad. Do I plan to review Netflix's Dracula when I have the time? I don't know. I don't know what I would say about it. I have like a couple thoughts about it, but I don't think I have enough to fill up a review. I might include it in some kind of bigger Dracula compilation, but I'm not the Moffat expert that I think you would need to be to really give that the treatment it would need. Wait, what are you talking about? Hold on, I have to scroll up in the chat. Oh, the Twilight fandom resurgence. Yeah. I feel like a lot of people that like Twilight as teenagers have now grown up and they went through that phase where like, oh, I was a horrible teenager for liking this horrible book and I must feel shame. And now they're past that and they're like, you know what? Screw that. I liked what I like. Don't shame girls for liking things. This book has its problems. We're going to acknowledge those problems and like what we liked about it and not like the problems. And now they're kind of owning their fandom. So good. Good for them. Have I heard about the Chronicles of Vladimir Todd? I've heard about them, but that's as far as I know. Don't know anything about them at all. So since I've been playing Vampire the Masquerade old game, do I think I'm going to try the new Masquerade game? You mean Bloodlines 2? Yes, I am. I sure am. Did you see the new trailer that just came out? It is so creepy. I don't mean the teaser they put on Twitter. I mean the real trailer on their website. That is dark and creepy. Netflix Dracula is bad. Yes, it is. There. I've summed up that review for you. Done. Don't need to review it on my channel now. Have I checked out Netflix Immortals? No, I haven't yet. So, this month we are reading Sunshine by Robin McKinley for the Vampire Book Club. You can join now and get started. We're all starting now. You have 1 month to read it or to not read it and just tag along. Join my Discord. Link is in the description of this video. Once you're there, you have to follow the rules to click the button to join the book club because it's a private group, but anyone can join. Hopefully we'll see you there. From now on, I'm going to answer questions in the chat and talk with the chat until we run out of things to talk about or until I run out of time. So thank you for joining me for the Vampire Book Club, and I hope to see you next time. Please come on Discord and talk about this book with us. We have fun talking in the chat. We cover up spoilers so you don't have to worry about getting spoiled. Right, now I'm reading the chat again. Yes, there has been a resurgence of vampire stuff. There are 4 shows on Netflix. There's a lot of vampire stuff coming out again. I think the vampire fatigue is faded and there's more vampire stuff. There's like V-Wars and all these other things on Netflix and people are just like casually vampiring now. And as long as nothing like Twilight comes along where there's like a mania fandom, I think it'll be okay and people won't get burnt out and we'll be allowed to have our vampires as long as we want them. And all the vampires in all the different ways. Angie Kelly sent me $5. Thank you, Angie. Plot holes will help the point of the book. As long as Awoken 2 is witty, everyone will love it. Thank you. You're right. And if I wasn't behind on my deadline for the novel I'm supposed to be writing for Company of Death 2 and 3, I'd be all for it. You know, maybe when I run out of my own books to write, we'll go back to Awoken. I miss Booze Your Own Adventure too. Those were fun to do. Oh, is V-Wars bad? That's disappointing. I haven't watched it yet. I just got the book. Someone sent me the book and I have that now. Should I read the book first before I watch the show? What do you think it's going to take nowadays for a vampire story to be really refreshing and capture your attention in a good way? Well, vampires are people too, right? They have people problems and they have vampire problems. And I think we have seen all the vampire problems that they can have. So I think what's going to make vampire stuff interesting is when their people problems are fresh and interesting and still have to be solved around their vampire problems. So it's kind of like with gay stories and queer stories, we don't want coming out stories anymore because we've seen them a million times and we want gay people to just be gay and have stories about stuff where they happen to be gay instead of it being about them being gay. Maybe the same thing with vampires. I could be down for that. I don't like things where they're like, well, our vampires are different. We're reinventing the vampire. I mean, if someone was to come up with something that's really never been done before and was completely creative and new, sure, I'd want to see it, but I don't think that's going to happen. Like, everything's been done so much. Just write good stories with good characters, with good relationships that are complex and weird and interesting and dramatic, and I'll be down for that. Have villains that are fighting because they believe in causes and have been wronged by the system, stuff like that. Did I see that 2 of Anne Rice's series got licensed by AMC? One is The Vampire Chronicles. Well, Bright Eyes 505, yes, I did see that. There is a lot more to that story than you seem to think. So Anne Rice and her son Christopher have been developing a Vampire Chronicles TV series that they want it to be like Game of Thrones, but for Vampire Chronicles, for Anne Rice's books. And they've been working on this since 2017. And they've had a showrunner, Brian Fuller, was going to run it, and then he dropped out. And then it was going to be on Hulu, and they were all set to go with Hulu. And then that fell through. And so for the last few months, we're like, this show's dead in the water. It's never going to happen. After Hulu dropped it, they're never going to find a network to host this show. And then today they announced that AMC is hosting the show. So yay. So unless AMC drops them too, maybe this show will actually happen. They've been talking about it for so long, of this Game of Thrones X version of Vampire Chronicles / The Witches, because it's a shared universe. So of course the Witches series is going to be involved there too, because there's crossover characters. I'm looking forward to it. We've been waiting for this for 45 years. It is time. And please, AMC, don't drop them too, because I don't know where else they're going to go. Oh, thanks, Artie. I'll check my Twitter when I am done with this, and I can open up more tabs. Would I like to see more vampire medias focus on myth and legends of the old vampire lores? Not really, because myth and legends of old vampire lores are either basically werewolves or basically zombies. They're not characters with like personalities, and that's less interesting to me. I like the more Byronic vampires. I've seen V-Wars and Immortals. The former is fascinating and timely, while the latter defies many expectations concerning the construction of hunter characters. Interesting. Well, I gotta check them out. I'll get around to them. I just have no time to watch things unless I'm specifically watching it to review, because, life is full. Life is so full. Everyone's like, oh, I'm going to do so many hobbies now in quarantine. Well, in quarantine, I have infinitely less time. My life has gone opposite than most people because I already worked from home. So now my work has been invaded by children. Did I see Wes Craven's Dracula 2000 in sequels? You saw Butler as the Phantom. Now you see him as Dracula. I saw Wes Craven's Dracula 2000 way before Butler was the Phantom. So that came first. And actually seeing Dracula 2000 made me think, hey, Butler was cool in that. He was a man of few words, quiet and mysterious. Maybe he would be a good Phantom. No, I was so wrong. But yes, I did a video on Dracula 2000. It is on this very YouTube channel that you are watching. So you can go watch my video and see my thoughts. I did it many years ago, and my style of video making has changed. So, take it with a grain of salt. But I still stand by what I said in that video. More vampire stories that are like Professor X and Magneto and X-Men, one championing vampire integration, one fighting for vampire supremacy. Yes, I would love that. Love me some conflicted villains. Worry that AMC wants to turn the Vampire Chronicles into What If the Walking Dead, What with Vampires? Well, I think part of the reason why Anne Rice and her son Christopher Rice have been having difficulty getting the show to happen perhaps may be because it is known that Anne Rice is a bit of a control freak when it comes to her intellectual property, and she wants it done her way. And I don't think they would have agreed to a network that wouldn't agree to that. So I'm not that worried that it's going to be Walking Dead, but vampires, because that would defeat the whole purpose of what I think they're going for. At least, we can hope. A lot of times when an author really maintains tight control of their property and a network or a movie is trying to do something fresh or different with it, it doesn't go well because, movie makers and TV show makers know how to make movies and TV shows, and book authors don't. But we also like the canon, so we'll see. Ooh, the chat just jumped on me. I'm reading the chat. Vampire the Masquerade Coterie of New York has a very good storyline, interesting characters, but the end is short and loose. Well, I'm going to be playing that game very soon because one of my Patreon patrons requested it. So I'm going to stream it and then review it. And that is my plan. Anne Rice did greenlight the Queen of the Damned movie, and then they gave her absolutely zero impact on it. She didn't get to do anything on it, and now she hates that movie. And she says, please never mention that movie in my presence. It is a source of great sadness to me. I do not want to hear that movie. Don't mention it in my presence. So I feel like that bitter experience has made her twice as gun shy, and now she's never going to let that happen again, and she's going to be very tight-fisted when it comes to control of her property. Also, her son is writing the script. So if her son is a lead script writer, they still have complete control. So, who would I cast as Lestat in the Vampire Chronicles series? I don't know. I don't know actors. I don't know humans. Who are people? I don't see people. I just see characters. Sorry. I am not hip with the young actors. Like, who's a 20-year-old actor who would be any good at it? Anne Rice said on her Facebook page, would you guys mind if Lestat was casted older? And I think that's good advice. Tom Cruise was 30. Stuart Townsend was 29. Older actors do make a better Lestat, even though he's supposed to be eternally 20. I would not mind if he was not. Am I going to review the first Bloodlines game actually? Maybe. I feel like I've got the content for it now. I would just have to sit down and write that script. And writing scripts is hard. It's very, very hard. That's the hardest part of making videos for me. It takes me like a month to write a script, a 4,000 word script. It's really hard. Exciting news today, this Anne Rice news that they found another network. They lost their network, then they found another one. I don't know why it's being announced as if this is like the first news of the show. Like, oh, this show is going to happen when it's been such old news for so long. Maybe that's the way they're trying to media spin it. I don't think the actor who plays Lestat should be older than 30. I feel like 30 is the limit. Especially because if it's going to be this epic sweeping show a la Game of Thrones, which is what they say they want, it's going to be on the air for like 8 to 10 years. He's going to age. Like, how old is this ageless immortal supposed to look by the time the show is over? Forgive me for drinking water. I'm not drinking wine tonight. How out of character for me. All right. Do you have any more questions for me? Any more thoughts? We've been talking together for a lovely hour and a half this evening, And as I promised last time, I got better lighting. My camera quality is still pretty low. I think it's because I'm using my laptop's webcam. I should probably invest in an actual webcam that can actually do high D so I don't look completely pixelated. I have heard the Vampire with a Y game is disappointing, and it made me less interested in playing it. We were actually talking about doing a playthrough of it, but after that disappointing news, I don't know if that's going to happen. We've got so many other games to play first. Do I prefer collaborations like when you and Paul did Phantom of the Paradise, or with Dominic Noble on the Vampire Chronicles, or prefer working alone? Well, collaborations sure are easier, because when I wrote those scripts with Dom for the Vampire Chronicles, I was just summarizing the book for him and, you know, hopefully what I thought was a funny way. And then he went in and put in his thoughts as well. And like he did the ultimate like structure of the script. So that took a lot off my plate. I'm good at collaboration. I love collaboration. That's why I like writing scripts with Lindsay for her shows, for PBS It's Lit and for her main channel. And anytime I can contribute to those, which isn't that often, but whenever I do, it's fun. Writing my own scripts is hard. What makes a good female vampire? Thank you, Angie Kelly, for $2. My biggest problem with female vampire stereotypes is that they're always so sexually available. They're usually there to titillate the male audience and to be sexually attracted to a male character and to seduce a male character against his will into sexy time so that the audience gets to see this woman acting sexy. And I think when a vampire is reduced to lust, be it like bloodlust or lust or whatever the border is between them, they're not a character at all. And I think a good female vampire character needs to have a bloodlust and be conflicted about her bloodlust, but she still needs to be a person too. And we don't see that problem with male vampires. Male vampires aren't just there being sexy with no feelings whatsoever. How come the female vampires don't get to have feelings? At least not real ones. So they need to have feelings. They need to have active goals. They need to want something other than to just drink blood. And they can be sexy. That's fine. It just can't be all they are. And also, it's nice to see female vampires who aren't between the age of 16 and 22. That's nice sometimes. Would I like to see my book turn into a movie or TV series? I would love to see that. I also think my book would make a great graphic novel. I mean, I'd be afraid they'd mess it up and ruin it, but I still would love to see it. And I feel like if I ever got to that level as an author, I should just be grateful, even if it winds up being bad. That would still be awesome. And I'd love to see a depiction of death on the big screen somehow, just being like the awesome death that I envision in my mind. Have I read the Chronicles of Vladimir Todd? Someone asked me that earlier, and my answer was no, I have not. Already sent me $5. Thank you. The only female vampire stereotype I actually like is a Malkavian vampire sexy, but in a crazy way like Drusilla from Buffy. Drusilla from Buffy is amazing. Hard agree. But she had a lot more going on than being sexy. Like, she kind of defied that slutty vampire trope. Like, she was hot, but in a childlike way, so it was different. Gerald Studios sent me $2.99. Thank you. God, I wish we had more eye candy himbo vampires. I mean, himbos are like the thing right now. Everybody loves himbos. That would be nice. I think even if they're not eye candy, just the himbos, though I guess that's part of what makes them himbos in the first place. Have I seen the movie called Bite Me? It came out last year. It's a romantic comedy about a woman in NYC who's part of the vampire subculture and falls in love with an IRS agent. So is she a real vampire, or is she just in like the not real vampire, the real vampires versus the like supernatural vampires? Or is she just in the community of people who like to live the vampire lifestyle? I have not seen it, clearly. We sind die Nacht. I have not seen it, but people keep telling me about it. I need to watch that. Yes, Brandon Sherman, I'm glad you're reading Interview with the Vampire. Yes. A himbo is the male version of a bimbo. It's a man who's gorgeous but dumb. Drusilla does have complex, fleshed out character and backstory. What do I have planned for vampire read-throughs? I hope Dracula's guest will feature. Well, Simon Peter Hughes, you are in luck, for I have recorded a video this very day reading Dracula's guest, which will be up for my Patreon patrons within a couple days, and then I'll probably make it public on the internet next week or the week after. And what I have planned for the future of vampire read-throughs, if I have to keep doing this, if I'm still not able to write scripts, which hopefully won't be too much longer. Everybody wants me to do Carmilla, and I would love to read you Carmilla and, you know, throw shade at Carmilla as we read it. However, it's very long, and based on how long my other videos were, if I broke it up the same way, like the same amount of time per video, it would be 6 videos, which is cool, but I don't know if people would watch all 6. When I did the vampire with a Y in 2 videos, the first video did very well, but the second video was like a fraction of the views. So I don't know that 6 videos of Carmilla would work. Though if I do them, put them on my Patreon, and my Patreon sponsors those videos, then it makes no difference to me, because that's the only financial thing that happens. So I saw someone sneaky walk by. 6 videos of Carmilla for my Patreon would be cool if my Patreon wanted it. And if nobody on YouTube watches it, then it is what it is. Aw, thank you. You'd watch every single one, Sigyn. Thank you. Dress as Carmilla. How does Carmilla dress? How did they dress in the 1800s in Styria? I'd have to wear like a high-necked lace-up thing. Oh, the sneaky one goes again. Everyone say hi to Paul. So yes, today I recorded 2 videos, one about Dracula's guest and one about all my new vampire books. And I'm doing this. So it's been a day full of vampires for me. But it's nice to do it all in one day because I could keep all my like lights and cameras out, and I'm wearing all my makeup. How did I first develop love for vampires and vampire subculture? Well, I have always loved dark, spooky things. I've loved that all my life, but never particularly vampires. I did love Christopher Pike's The Last Vampire series. I was obsessed with that series, loved that character. But beyond that, I wasn't into vampires at all as a child. What I was into was the Phantom of the Opera. And the Phantom of the Opera was just like the end-all, be-all of my life. I was super fan, hardcore, obsessed with Phantom of the Opera. Another dark, spooky thing that's kind of classy the same way vampires are. I was very into that like Victorian Gothic aesthetic. So when I was also a big Anne Rice Vampire Chronicles Lestat fan, just like that specific vampire, but not vampires in general. So when I was trying to come up with ideas for a show, because I've been working with Lindsay on Nostalgia Chick and all those shows for a while, I came up with the idea to do a show that was about comparing books to their movies and like seeing the difference between the way a book is to the movie made out of it. So I started making a list of all the books and movies that I had passionate feelings about to compare. And I looked at this list and had about 8 things on it. And 7 of those 8 I realized were vampire movies. And I was like, why do I have so much to say about vampire books versus movies? Maybe I should just make a show about vampires instead. And I had a friend who had a web show on YouTube called Phantom Reviews, where he reviewed every single adaptation of Phantom that existed. And I thought, well, I could steal my friend's idea and I could do vampire reviews and I could just review every single vampire thing that ever existed. And even though vampires weren't my thing, they were kind of there in my subconscious, and I started working on it. And the more I worked, the more I learned. I was just like, well, I'm just going to become a vampire scholar now. And they say if you study something for 30 minutes every day, you'll be an expert in 3 years, or whatever that statistic is. I'm just pulling numbers out of the air. But just start working on it, and it fits my aesthetic. It fits my Victorian Gothic vibe, Phantom of the Opera wannabe, which has always been my thing. So it works. Since you asked for my life story, there it is. Why is there always a sexual undertone to the modern vampire lore? What character element does it represent? Is it the predator-prey relationship? I would say there's always a sexual element to vampire lore. It's often because, vampires bite you with their mouths, and that's kind of automatically sexual, whether it's a rape metaphor or a seduction metaphor. And there are plenty of horrific vampires that aren't sexual at all. Though the fact that a vampire is latching onto your body and drawing life force out of your body is going to be rapey no matter what, even if it's not sexy. So I think that just gets caught up in it a lot, that a vampire is a rape metaphor on any level, unless you have a consenting vampire biting situation where someone's like, oh yes, bite me, I want you to, it's hot. Do I still talk to Todd of the Shadows? Yes, he is my friend. Darren Shan vampires didn't feel sexual. That's right, they sure didn't, because they were vampires for children, and most vampires for children are not sexual. I was very amused in the Darren Shan books when the way the vampires make each other vampires, they like cut their fingers like this, and then they put their fingertips together and they transfer blood that way. So there is no biting, there is no neck action. I was like, that is the least sexy way for a grown man to make a young boy a vampire, which is great because you don't want it to turn into like a creepy pedophilia thing. So good for that, to make it so unsexy. And in that case, the vampire was more about cool superpowers. It was kind of like a superhero thing rather than anything sexy at all. Why do I think there are so many bad vampire movies compared to good in Hollywood? Well, 2 reasons. The first is that when something's popular, there's always going to be infinitely more bad versions of it than good. It's like some law, not Murphy's Law, maybe Murphy's Law, one of those laws where, it's like 90% of anything is going to be crap and 10% is going to be great, something like that. The other thing is that because it's horror, a lot of horror is made low budget. It's not considered artistic until it is. Am I ready for Cats this Friday? Yes, I am. Lindsay and company, we are streaming Cats because it's Andrew Lloyd Webber, man. He's our guy. Do I still see Nella? Well, she lives in New York and I don't anymore, so I see her on the internet. I've visited New York a few times since I moved away, so I see her then. I crash at her place because she has a couch. How do I like the True Blood books versus the show? Well, when I first read the True Blood books, back before I ever watched a show, I loved them. They were like chicklet, they were fluffy, they scratched my mystery itch. I love mysteries. But going back and reading them now that I'm old, I see some flaws in them that I didn't pick up on when I was younger. In the show, I think fixed some of those flaws, and then the show got real weird after about season 4. So, both have their issues, but I watched it all. It was my trash. Would I ever do an updated Phantom collection video? Yes, I would, and I plan to, because not only have I acquired more Phantom books, and my first video was just about my books, but I have so many other Phantom things that I want to share. I just gotta do it because all my Phantom things are like displayed, right? So I gotta get the camera up there, hold up the thing, maybe do like close-ups. I'm not sure like if it's gonna need camera work, how I'm gonna deal with that, if I'm gonna need someone to help me and hold the camera and do all the like the panning shots. So and so we're just figuring out the logistical to how to show my Phantom collection. I, during quarantine, have been working on my Phantom scrapbook, which has always just been all my Phantom small flat things. So like flyers and newspaper clippings and stuff that have been in a folder. And I'm finally putting them in a proper scrapbook with like pretty backgrounds and stuff. Can't wait to show you that. I do want to do that video. Maybe I'll do that later this month. Why hasn't there been a good vampire movie in recent times? Only Lovers Left Alive was pretty good. I like that one. That was after Twilight. Have you watched the series version of What We Do in the Shadows? If so, what do you think? No, because I do not have cable. I'm going to have to stream it somewhere. I don't have Hulu either. I got Netflix and the Disney Plus. That's all I've got. So anything that's not on those two things, I have to figure out another way to watch. I really want to watch What We Do in the Shadows TV show. I have heard great things. Catching up on the chat. Day-walking vampires versus non-daywalkers. Well, guess who was a day-walking vampire? All the vampires in here, the night meant nothing to them. They just went out in the day. They went out in the night. They never had to sleep, so they could do anything at all times of day. They never ate either, except when they did. Sometimes they like to eat raw things like nuts and berries and tuna tartare. What other Victorian Gothic character could Gerard Butler play? You be quiet. You don't even give him that idea. You stop right now. Is Disney Plus worth getting if you like Disney stuff? And as someone who has a 5-year-old child, we like Disney stuff. Revive all the Universal monsters, a la the recent Invisible Man remake. What do you think they do with Dracula? Well, the Dark Universe, which is what Dracula Untold was supposed to be the start of, was gonna be part of that. So I don't know if they're still gonna do that. What they were gonna do with Dracula is have Dracula be in modern times. The Charles Dance vampire was going to be involved, and that was going to be what they do with Dracula. I also heard that the Dark Universe's version of Phantom was going to be modernized too. Everything in the Dark Universe was going to be modernized version, which the Victorian Gothic setting is what I love so much. But they've all been done before, so I don't know. Are day-walking vampires valid? Absolutely, Angie Kelly, because Dracula was a day-walking vampire. Lord Ruthven was a day-walking vampire. We didn't get vampires that couldn't go out in the day until 1922 when Nosferatu got destroyed by the sunlight. Sunlight destroying vampires is entirely a Hollywood creation. Day-walking vampires are the original vampire. Do I think Kindred the Embrace could ever or should be remade? Well, Pennywise, according to the World of Darkness documentary, the creators of World Darkness feel it kind of already has in True Blood. And it probably wouldn't be able to be remade now because it would be derivative of that since True Blood ripped them off. Speaking of the World of Darkness documentary, I watched it and reviewed it, but I kept it private for my Patreon. So if you are curious in seeing that review, join my Patreon and you can watch my review that I released last month that nobody else has seen. Yes, Carmilla is a day-walking vampire too. It's often that vampires that go in the day don't have their full powers and they get more powerful at dark, but it's not like the sun hurts them. Do you think we could get another chance at the Dark Universe? I've heard we already are, and that's what's currently going on. I think Bride of Frankenstein is coming soon, so we'll see. Yeah, the sunshine thing does seem to be integral to vampires. And in my book, The Company of Death, do I have a copy of that here? I do have a copy of that here. I made my vampires vulnerable to the sun. They can't go out in the sun. They aren't even conscious during the day in this book, and that's totally not canon to vampire. I did it because I like that trope. I think it's fun that vampires have limits, that the sun will destroy them. Though it's different in my book. You'll find out in book 2 what actually happens to a vampire if they go out in the sun. Yes, there is a World of Darkness documentary. You can watch it on Amazon Prime for free if you are an Amazon Prime member, or you pay if you're just on Amazon. Or I think you can pay on YouTube. There's ways to watch it. And I reviewed it. And boy, did I have feelings about it. Bride of Frankenstein starring Gerard Butler. No! Oh my gosh. Is there an estimate release for, are you talking about book 2 of this? No, it was supposed to be later this year, but everything's gotten pushed back. I don't have a date yet. We haven't been able to work on it because of things, so everything's on hold. Sad tear. Book 3 is also in the works, but it will come when it comes. I'm sorry for the delay, but there's nothing I can do except try to stay positive. How did you not know I was an author, Joanne Markov? I pimp my book every chance I get. Buy my book, or check it out from the library. You know, I just like people to experience it. I got a really nice review on this book by a blogger the other day, and I retweeted it. So if you want to read a review, go to my Twitter and look at my recent retweets, and you can learn about my book. Why do I think a lot of modern vampires portrayed as super strong and fast, like in True Blood and Twilight? Well, because of Anne Rice. That's how her vampires are, and people like that trope because it's kind of superhero-y, and superhero tropes and vampire tropes are often very intertwined, especially with the metaphors they represent. So, but Anne Rice started it. Anne Rice made that cool, and Anne Rice is the biggest influencer of all modern vampire pop culture. Like, you know, of course, everything's based on Dracula, but most modern vampires have more in common with Anne Rice's than with Dracula. Is there an audio? Are you talking about my book? Yes, there's an audio version of my book. You can go to tantor.com, or if you like Audible, go to Audible. It's on all the audiobook carriers. Oh, thank you, Sasha Thompson. Go watch Sasha Thompson's YouTube channel review of The Company of Death. Whoa, the chat just disappeared. There it goes. Just came back. Anne Rice biopic starring Gerard Butler as Anne Rice. You are ruthless tonight. Do I prefer vampires more believable based on a virus or something, or fantastical magic? Fantastical? I mean, I like them both, but if I had to choose, I like the fantastical magic. You know, when you try to explain it, often it gets silly. Like Anne Rice explaining her vampires being descended from an alien's ghost. That was silly. I liked it better before we knew. So we've been talking to hours. I'm so glad you're all here with me this evening. I should probably start wrapping up. If you have any more thoughts or questions for me, now's your chance before we say goodnight. I'm glad you're drunk tonight, Artie Pavlov. I wish I were too. Good night. Do I believe vampires are still around? No, I don't believe vampires are real. Wish they were. That'd be great. Yes, Anne Rice's vampires are descended from an alien ghost. So in Anne Rice's mythology, the way the first vampire was created was that a spirit, a malevolent demonic spirit, which not a ghost, but a spirit. These are creatures that exist kind of on a different plane of humanity, and they're all around the world. But the spirit went into a wounded person through her blood, because this was a bloodthirsty spirit, inhabited her body, fused with her brain, turned her into a bloodthirsty creature of the night. She's the first vampire. So in Prince Lestat and the Realms of Atlantis, we learn that this spirit was actually not a spirit, even though spirits do exist in this world as like changeling other dimensional beings. But this was a ghost. And it wasn't just a ghost of a person. It was the ghost of an alien who had been created by a race of aliens that are like truly alien, but these aliens, these like blob aliens, made humanoid replicants, or replinoids as they call them, in a lab. They basically grew fake humans and sent these fake humans down to Earth to infiltrate Earth and like rule Earth. And this one alien replinoid human, so he's biologically a human, even though he's created by aliens in a lab, went down to Earth and was just like, I don't want to rule them, at least not in a bad way. I'm going to give them my alien technology and help them flourish. And he created Atlantis, which was technologically advanced, but then the aliens didn't like it, so they rose up against him and they killed him. He became a ghost. And then his ghost became the spirit, which many thousands of years later inhabited the first vampire. Scarlet Dale gave me $5. Thank you so much. Excited for book 2. Yes, me too. Oh, Kit just bought the audiobooks. Yay! Yeah, I mean, the more recent Anne Rice books are interesting, but they sure get weird. Will I ever do vampire read-throughs of a chapter of The Company of Death? I have done a live reading of The Company of Death. I did it at an author event, and it was recorded. And that recording was going to be put on the website of the event hosts. But they told me that the recording didn't work for some reason. So they asked me to re-record it. So I did. And I re-recorded it just last month and sent it to them. And they're going to put it on their channel. And as soon as they do that, I will share it with you. I'm reading chapter 13, I think, one of my favorite chapters for you. And then you actually get to hear me read part of Company of Death. But if you want to hear someone read the whole Company of Death itself, just buy the audiobook or get it from the library. Can you find a physical copy of my book on Amazon? Yes, you sure can. Yes, my book is on Kindle Unlimited. So if you have Kindle Unlimited, you can read it for free, minus what you pay to be part of Kindle Unlimited. Just if you read my book and you decide you're not into it, still flip all the way to the end of the book, because then, I get paid for every page you flip. It's like 50 cents per page. So it's good. Always flip to the end of books, even if you don't want to finish reading them. Do I think there will be more Anne Rice films coming out? No, never. Just the TV show, which I hope actually does come out. You guys want to talk more about Anne Rice vampires? See, I was about to go, and then you got me all excited about Anne Rice vampires. It's not like I have a preference or a weakness for them or anything. Sorry, I might have missed it. Is your book on Audible? Yes, my book is on Audible. Look up The Company of Death by Elisa Hansen on Audible. If you're an Audible member, use your credit and you can listen without paying any extra. If someone reads my book on Kindle Unlimited, do I get paid again? Yes, I get paid every time you turn a page in Kindle Unlimited. Every author does. There's this misconception that Kindle Unlimited authors and publishers don't get paid, but they do. Every time you turn a page in Kindle Unlimited, they get a fraction of a cent. So it's good. Who's the strongest Anne Rice vampire that's not Lestat? You mean like physically strong? Probably Gregory? Or Seth? I guess probably Seth. I don't know. Her vampires are inconsistently powered. It's not the oldest one that's strong. It's, you know, like Lestat wasn't the oldest. Lestat was stronger than Armand when he was a newborn. It's just the way the dark gift works sometime. Antonio Banderas as Armand. No, just no. Yes, I agree. He is not that character, but I see why they cast him. They wanted to cast Armand as a grown-ass man because if they didn't, they would be feeding into the dangerous stereotype that gay men are pedophiles. So they want to avoid that. So they're going to cast a grown-up. And then they're like, what grown-up can we cast as this Armand character? Who's the sexiest actor there is right now that will make people come watch our movie? Why, Antonio Banderas. Okay. He's weird and foreign, right? Kind of like Louis in Interview, but I just started. It's still on part 1. I mean, what's not to like about Louis? He is so tragic and sad. You love Louis. You know, thank you, Mort69, from watching from the Ukraine. I need to play the Legacy of Kain games. This Anne Rice vampire gifts with early 2000s edge. Perhaps. Strongest vampire is the one who's most angsty. Oh gosh, they're all so angsty. Joanne Markov, my biggest beef with Anne Rice vampires is that they don't, you know, do the thing. Are you talking about sex? Because I love that about Anne Rice vampires. I'm like, yes, asexual vampires, my jam. The one thing about Anne Rice vampires and sex is that anytime they do have sex, like when Lestat briefly turns human and then turns back into a vampire, and then when he takes a magic potion that lets him magically have sex for 5 minutes, each time he does it, he's like, yeah, sex is boring. Drinking blood is so much sexier. It's just so much better. Sex is lame compared to this. It's dull. And I'm like, yes, true. Just keep it to blood drinking. Use it as a metaphor. It replaces it. And just imagine something that's so much more amazing than sex supposedly is, and that's drinking blood. How great that has to be. Just got to wonder, right? Do I like 69 Eyes Rock Band? I like one song of theirs, which was what's it called? Stigmata. I love their song Stigmata, mainly because I thought Lestat would like it, and I like put it on a Lestat playlist one time. If I'm not answering your questions, my answer is probably no, or I don't know. And I don't want to bore people by just repeating myself. Oh, Anne Rice's vampires are exceedingly romantic and sensual. And the blood drinking is absolutely a sexual metaphor. They just don't also have literal sex. Not like True Blood, where drinking blood will turn the vampire on and then they want to also have sex. So it's more like an aphrodisiac. It's part of sex instead of being a replacement for it. Oh, thank you to everyone who's like getting to my book. You guys are awesome. If you like vampires, so do I. Read this book, and then the second one will be out soon. Hello. Oh my gosh. Did I meet Anne Rice IRL? I sure did. I met Anne Rice twice in my life. Once was when Prince Lestat came out. She was doing a signing in New York City back when I still lived there. And I went, and I had just had a baby. This was in October. I had a baby in August. So I had my tiny little 2.5-month-old baby with me. And I go to this book signing, and it's huge. There's like 400 people there, and the line is so long. And I'm waiting in this line with my, squirming baby in the sling to get my book signed after hearing her have a nice talk. And then some nice person was like, hey, you should let this lady with the tiny baby cut the line and go to the front. And then everyone else was like, yes, we should. And I said, bless you fools. And they let me, and I got to cut the line and meet Anne Rice. And she cooed over my baby so much. She was like, I'm going to steal you from my cute. I'm like, yes, my baby is so cute. And Anne Rice loves my baby. And then a few weeks later, that was like beginning of October. So then this is at the end of October, like almost, it was at Halloween. I went to New Orleans for Undead Con, which is tied in with the Vampire Ball, which is an Anne Rice thing that Anne Rice used to go to all the time. And then she stopped going, but this was her first time coming back. No, it was her second time coming back. And she had previously watched my video about Interview with the Vampire and shared it on her Facebook page and said, this was the previous year, had said, oh, I wonder if this girl who did this video is coming to Undead Con. And I had emailed her and been like, I wish I could. Thank you for sharing my video, but I'm going to be on my honeymoon that time. And she was like, oh, have a happy honeymoon. So this is a year later. I go to Undead Con. I meet her again. I do the thing where you wait an hour in line and you get to sit down with her with 4 other people for 5 minutes and have like a 5-person conversation. And I was like, I was the person who made that video. And also you met my baby last month. And she was like, that was you. Why didn't you say so? And I was like, sorry, I was shy. So I got to have my 5-minute conversation with Anne Rice and 4 other people. How many kids do I have? I have 2. I have a 5-year-old and a 1-year-old. And that is all the kids I will ever have. If I'd met Bram Stoker in real life, what would I have said to him? I probably wouldn't have said this because it's impolite, but I would want to find out if he was gay, because there is so much speculation that Bram Stoker was closeted, either bi or gay or queer on some level. And I really want to know if that's true or if that's just headcanoning. Though I don't know if I would ask him that, because he probably wouldn't like that question. Because if he was closeted, he wouldn't want anyone to know. When did I have another spawn? Why, a year ago, because she is 1 year. Actually, she turned 1 in March, so she is 1 year and 2 months now. Yep, Persephone is 1 year old already, and she's almost walking. Almost walking. I can't tell if the chat is frozen or if you guys are just not talking anymore. I think we're winding down now. Is there an idea that Stoker based Dracula off Oscar Wilde? I vaguely remember reading this. No, this theory is that Stoker based him off Irving, Henry Irving, the actor whose theater that he managed, because he was very flamboyant and outlandish. But there's no proof of that either. read speculation that Dracula reflected gay stereotypes about Wilde, but I didn't find it very convincing. Well, there's a lot of speculation about gay undertones in Dracula, like Dracula's relationship with Jonathan Harker and Renfield is a lot of queer coding in it that perhaps was unintentional and subconscious on Bram Stoker's part, or perhaps it was intentional. Nobody knows. There's a lot of mystery surrounding it. But a male vampire targeting other men has a homoerotic reading to it no matter what you do. Bram had a wife who sued the creators of Nosferatu, but a lot of gay men in oldie times had wives. It was a thing they did. Or he could have been bi. Maybe he loved his wife. Maybe they were fine. We don't know. There's a lot of talk about Bram Stoker's sexuality out there, which has me wondering. All I know is what I read, what other scholars say. Did I like the Taltos series and the Mayfair Witches saga? I read The Witching Hour and Lasher, and then I gave up, so I've not read Taltos, just because it got like way too weird. I enjoyed The Witching Hour, and it made me want to read Lasher, and actually listened to Lasher on an audiobook on a road trip when I was moving from California back to the East Coast, so I got to listen to the entire Lasher, and it was the best audiobook I've ever listened to in my life. That audiobook narrator was amazing. If you have to listen to an audiobook of Lasher, highly recommended, but Taltos is just too weird. Like the Mona stuff is too weird. Yeah, there's a lot of incest in those books. All right, guys. We've been doing this for 2 hours now. 2 hours and 12 minutes according to my time. So it's time to say goodnight. Good evening for good. So if you're part of the Vampire Book Club, remember we are reading Sunshine by Robin McKinley next. So join the Discord. Even if you don't want to read the book, you can join and follow along with us. Look out for a stream on Sunshine by Robin McKinley a month from now. I will be posting 2 videos to my Patreon within the next couple days. I recorded, and they'll be public on YouTube shortly after. One video is on all my new vampire books, and the other is on Dracula's Guest by Bram Stoker and the interesting history surrounding that. Thank you for joining me for the Vampire Book Club. So good to see you all. I'll see you on Discord. Come talk about vampires with me. We're there all the time. Until next time, good night.